He secretly loved her. He lured her with a fake birthday party and finally spent a passionate night with her. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter's Stories. Let's start with a beautiful prayer for my beautiful family members. Heavenly Father, bless our precious story family. Touch every heart reading today with your divine love. Guide these words to bring joy and comfort to each beautiful soul. Thank you for uniting us through these stories. Amen. My dearest readers, how are you today? My heart is overflowing with joy to be with you again. With my beloved wife Binta by my side, we're blessed to share another story filled with pure love and emotion. Binta has been teasing me about gaining only 50 new family members in 24 hours. But my precious readers, are you happy with my work? Have our previous stories touched your hearts? For our new family members joining us today, how did you find our loving community? If our stories bring warmth to your hearts, please share your feelings by commenting, "We are happy and satisfied." Your love and support mean everything to us. My beautiful family, how was our last story? Did it touch your soul? I pour my heart into each tale, hoping to bring joy and love to your lives. Now let us embark on today's journey together, a story crafted with pure love and deep emotions, just for you, my precious readers. With endless love and gratitude, Mr. Peter and Binta. The morning sun painted Chicago's skyline in shades of amber and gold, transforming the city's glass towers into burning pillars that stretched toward the heavens. From the 47th floor of Lawson Enterprises, Mabel Sawyer stood transfixed by the view, her slender fingers resting against the floor-to-ceiling window. 3 years as executive assistant to Bentley Lawson, and still, this view made her heart skip a beat. The early morning light caught the subtle highlights in her dark hair, creating a halo effect that would have taken any observer's breath away. But at 6:45 a.m., the office floor was empty save for her, just as she preferred it. These quiet moments before the chaos of the corporate world descended were her sanctuary. Mabel's reflection in the glass showed a woman who commanded attention without seeking it. Her charcoal pencil skirt and cream silk blouse spoke of understated elegance, while her natural hair was styled in a sophisticated crown of braids that added height to her already impressive stature. At 28, she carried herself with the confidence of someone a decade older, earned through years of proving herself in rooms where she was often the only woman of color. The gentle hum of the climate control system was interrupted by the distinctive ding of the executive elevator. Mabel didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Only 2 people had access to that elevator at this hour, and she was one of them. The other was Bentley Lawson himself. His footsteps, measured and purposeful, echoed across the marble floor. Handmade Italian leather shoes, she knew without looking. Bentley had a weakness for fine craftsmanship, something she'd learned early in her tenure when he'd tasked her with finding a replacement for his favorite cobbler who'd retired to Tuscany. "Miss Sawyer." His voice, deep and controlled, carried across the space between them like warm honey. Now she turned, a practiced smile gracing her features. Bentley Lawson stood in his office doorway, every inch the powerful CEO. His charcoal Tom Ford suit was impeccable, custom-tailored to his athletic frame. At 35, he was youngest CEO in Chicago's financial district, having built Lawson Enterprises from a modest family business into a global powerhouse. "The Jensen merger files?" he inquired, though his eyes seemed to be studying something in her face that had nothing to do with merger documents. "Already on your desk, Mr. Lawson," she replied, moving toward her own desk with practiced grace, "along with the quarterly projections you requested and the initial reports from the Singapore expansion team." She met his gaze steadily, professional as always, though something in her chest fluttered when their eyes locked. "I also took the liberty of rescheduling your lunch with Senator Harrison," she continued, settling into her ergonomic chair. His office called late last night about an emergency session on the Hill. I moved him to next Thursday and arranged for Chef Marcus to cater in your private dining room instead of the club. The senator's aide mentioned he's been craving authentic Italian. A ghost of a smile played at the corners of Bentley's mouth. You never cease to amaze me, Miss Sawyer. Just doing my job, Mr. Lawson. But they both knew it was more than that. In 3 years, Mabel had become indispensable, anticipating needs before they arose, solving problems before they fully formed. She'd transformed his chaotic world into ordered perfection, with an efficiency that bordered on miraculous. What she didn't see was how his hands clenched behind his back as he stood there, how the muscles in his jaw worked as he fought to keep his voice neutral. For 2 years, Bentley had watched her excel at everything she touched, had witnessed her quiet strength and fierce intelligence. And for 2 years, he'd been falling deeper into an impossible love that threatened to shatter the careful professional distance between them. The board meeting starts in 45 minutes, Mabel reminded him, pulling up his schedule on her dual monitors. Would you like me to brief you on the updated agenda? Bentley nodded, following her into his office. The space was a testament to power and taste, all clean lines and modern furniture, with abstract art worth millions adorning the walls. But lately, he found himself increasingly distracted by her presence in this room, by the way she moved through his space with such confidence and grace. As she began her briefing, her voice clear and precise, Bentley found himself studying the way the morning light played across her features. She had a small freckle just below her left ear that appeared darker in certain lights. He'd noticed it 8 months ago during a late-night strategy session, and now he couldn't seem to forget its existence. Mr. Lawson, Mabel's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Did you hear what I said about the pension fund allocation? Sorry, Ms. Sawyer. Would you repeat that? He ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare gesture of discomposure. She tilted her head slightly, concern flickering across her features. Are you feeling all right? You seem distracted lately. Should I call Doctor? Princeton for your annual physical? The genuine care in her voice made his heart constrict. No, I'm fine. Just thinking about the Jensen merger. It was a lie, and something in her expression suggested she knew it. But professional boundaries were professional boundaries, and neither of them was willing to cross that line. Not yet. The merger documents are comprehensive, she assured him, turning to the relevant page in her tablet. I had legal work through the night to address the concerns you raised yesterday. The new terms should satisfy both parties while protecting our interests in the Asian markets. As she spoke, a strand of hair fell loose from her elegant updo, catching the light. Bentley's fingers itched to tuck it back into place, to let his hand linger against her cheek. Instead, he gripped the arm of his chair tighter, forcing himself to focus on the documents before them. The morning continued in this dance they'd perfected over the years, professional, efficient, and beneath the surface, charged with an electricity neither dared acknowledge. They moved through merger details, quarterly projections, and market analyses with practiced ease, their minds in perfect sync on business matters while their hearts beat an entirely different rhythm. At 7:30, other executives began filtering onto the floor. The spell of their private morning world began to break as voices filled the outer office and phones started ringing. Mabel rose from her seat across from his desk, gathering her materials with efficient movements. One more thing, she said, pausing at the door. The charity gala next weekend? The planning committee requested your input on the seating arrangements. Apparently, there's some concern about placing the governor's wife next to the mayor's husband after last month's social media incident. Bentley suppressed a smile. Only Mabel would be aware of such potentially disastrous social dynamics. What would you suggest? I've drafted 3 alternative arrangements, she replied, pulling up the diagrams on her tablet. This one maintains all the necessary power dynamics while keeping potentially volatile personalities at opposite ends of the room. He studied the seating chart she presented, but found himself more captivated by the subtle scent of her perfume. Something elegant and understated, with notes of jasmine and vanilla. It was the same fragrance she'd worn since her first day, and he'd come to associate it with competence and quiet strength. "Perfect, as usual," he managed, forcing his attention back to the task at hand. "Go with your recommendation." She nodded, professional mask firmly in place. "Very good, Mr. Lawson. The board members are beginning to arrive. Shall I have Isabella bring in coffee service?" "Please." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket in one smooth motion. As she turned to leave, he added, "Miss Sawyer?" She paused, looking back over her shoulder. "Yes, Mr. Lawson." For a moment, he almost broke, almost let the walls come crashing down to tell her everything he'd been holding back. How her brilliance left him in awe. How her quiet strength had become the foundation his world built itself upon. How he'd learned to measure his days by her presence and his nights by her absence. Instead, he said, "Excellent work, as usual." A small smile touched her lips, genuine but guarded. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson." As she left his office, Bentley turned to face the windows, trying to regain his composure. The Chicago skyline stretched before him, a testament to power and ambition. He'd conquered this concrete jungle, built an empire that spanned continents. But standing in his tower of glass and steel, watching Mabel's reflection move efficiently through the outer office, he felt like the biggest fool in the city. Because for all his power, all his wealth, all his carefully cultivated control, he couldn't find the courage to bridge the gap between himself and the one person who made his success mean something. Instead, he stood in his glass tower, watching her through windows and reflections, loving her silently while the city woke around them. The board members would arrive soon, and they would discuss mergers and acquisitions, market strategies and global expansion. But in these quiet morning moments, Bentley Lawson, the powerful CEO of Lawson Enterprises, was simply a man watching a woman he couldn't have, shouldn't want, and absolutely couldn't stop loving. The morning sun continued its ascent, and another day began in the glass tower, full of unspoken words and carefully maintained distances, of professional excellence and personal longing, of two hearts beating in sync while their owners pretended not to notice. And through it all, Chicago sprawled beneath them, a city of possibilities and missed chances, of power and vulnerability, of love hidden behind glass walls and corporate masks. Chapter 2. Unspoken. The executive dining room at Lawson Enterprises occupied the entire west wing of the 46th floor, offering panoramic views of Lake Michigan. At 2 in the afternoon, most executives had returned to their offices, leaving the space in hushed tranquility. Bentley Lawson sat at his usual corner table, barely touching the expertly prepared salmon before him, his attention fixed on a table across the room. Marcus Chen, his VP of Operations and oldest friend, followed Bentley's gaze to where Mabel sat with a group of department heads. She was leading what appeared to be an informal strategy session, her tablet propped against a water glass as she gestured elegantly to emphasize a point. Even from this distance, her natural authority was evident in the way the others leaned in, hanging on her every word. "You're staring again," Marcus observed, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. The afternoon sun caught his silver temples, evidence of 15 years in the corporate battlefield alongside Bentley. Bentley forced his attention back to his untouched meal. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please." Marcus set down his cutlery, fixing his friend with a knowing look. "I've known you since Stanford. You've never been able to lie worth a damn, at least not to me. Every lunch for the past month, you've barely touched your food because you're too busy watching her like some lovesick teenager. Keep your voice down, Bentley hissed, though no one was within earshot. The great Bentley Lawson, Marcus continued, undeterred. The man who closed the Singapore merger without breaking a sweat. The shark who outmaneuvered the Peterson Group in the middle of a market crash, and he can't tell his assistant he's in love with her. He shook his head, a mixture of amusement and exasperation in his expression. You're pathetic. Bentley's jaw clenched, the muscle ticking beneath his skin. It's not that simple, Marcus. You know it isn't. Enlighten me. She's brilliant. Bentley's voice dropped lower, intense despite its softness. Harvard Business School, top of her class. She could run her own company, probably better than half the CEOs I know. She's not just some assistant. If I tell her how I feel, best case scenario, I lose the most competent executive assistant I've ever had. Worst case, he ran a hand through his dark hair. She thinks I'm another CEO preying on his employees. Across the room, Mabel's laugh carried over, warm and genuine. Bentley's hand tightened on his water glass. So instead, Marcus said slowly, you're going to pine away like a teenager who can't work up the courage to ask someone to prom. The Bentley I know doesn't hide from challenges. The Bentley you know has never faced this particular challenge. He loosened his tie slightly, a rare gesture of discomfort. You didn't see her face last week when Richardson made that comment about women in the boardroom. The contempt in her eyes. She's fought twice as hard to be taken seriously in this world. One wrong move from me and I destroy everything she's built. Marcus leaned back, studying his friend. Have you considered that maybe you're not giving her enough credit? Because for all his power, all his wealth, all his carefully cultivated control, he couldn't find the courage to bridge the gap between himself and the one person who made his success mean something. Instead, he stood in his glass tower, watching her through windows and reflections, loving her silently while the city woke around them. The board members would arrive soon, and they would discuss mergers and acquisitions, market strategies, and global expansion. But in these quiet morning moments, Bentley Lawson, the powerful CEO of Lawson Enterprises, was simply a man watching a woman he couldn't have, shouldn't want, and absolutely couldn't stop loving. The morning sun continued its ascent, and another day began in the glass tower, full of unspoken words and carefully maintained distances, of professional excellence and personal longing, of two hearts beating in sync while their owners pretended not to notice. And through it all, Chicago sprawled beneath them, a city of possibilities and missed chances, of power and vulnerability, of love hidden behind glass walls and corporate masks. Chapter 2. Unspoken. The executive dining room at Lawson Enterprises occupied the entire west wing of the 46th floor, offering panoramic views of Lake Michigan. At 2 in the afternoon, most executives had returned to their offices, leaving the space in hushed tranquility. Bentley Lawson sat at his usual corner table, barely touching the expertly prepared salmon before him, his attention fixed on a table across the room. Marcus Chen, his VP of Operations and oldest friend, followed Bentley's gaze to where Mabel sat with a group of department heads. She was leading what appeared to be an informal strategy session, her tablet propped against a water glass as she gestured elegantly to emphasize a point. Even from this distance, her natural authority was evident in the way the others leaned in, hanging on her every word. "You're staring again," Marcus observed, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. The afternoon sun caught his silver temples, evidence of 15 years in the corporate battlefield alongside Bentley. Bentley forced his attention back to his untouched meal. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please." Marcus set down his cutlery, fixing his friend with a knowing look. "I've known you since Stanford. You've never been able to lie worth a damn, at least not to me. Every lunch for the past month you've barely touched your food because you're too busy watching her like some lovesick teenager. Keep your voice down, Bentley hissed, though no one was within earshot. The great Bentley Lawson, Marcus continued, undeterred. The man who closed the Singapore merger without breaking a sweat. The shark who outmaneuvered the Peterson Group in the middle of a market crash. And he can't tell his assistant he's in love with her. He shook his head, a mixture of amusement and exasperation in his expression. You're pathetic. Bentley's jaw clenched, the muscle ticking beneath his skin. It's not that simple, Marcus. You know it isn't. Enlighten me. She's brilliant. Bentley's voice dropped lower, intense despite its softness. Harvard Business School, top of her class. She could run her own company, probably better than half the CEOs I know. She's not just some assistant. If I tell her how I feel, best case scenario, I lose the most competent executive assistant I've ever had. Worst case, he ran a hand through his dark hair. She thinks I'm another CEO preying on his employees. Across the room, Mabel's laugh carried over, warm and genuine. Bentley's hand tightened on his water glass. So instead, Marcus said slowly, you're going to pine away like a teenager who can't work up the courage to ask someone to prom. The Bentley I know doesn't hide from challenges. The Bentley you know has never faced this particular challenge. He loosened his tie slightly, a rare gesture of discomfort. You didn't see her face last week when Richardson made that comment about women in the boardroom, the contempt in her eyes. She's fought twice as hard to be taken seriously in this world. One wrong move from me, and I destroy everything she's built. Marcus leaned back, studying his friend. Have you considered that maybe you're not giving her enough credit? Mabel's a grown woman who can make her own decisions, and if you think she hasn't noticed the way you look at her, what are you talking about? For someone so brilliant at reading market trends, you can be remarkably blind. Marcus gestured subtly with his fork. Watch her when she thinks no one's looking. Before Bentley could respond, the click of heels on marble announced Mabel's approach. She moved with her characteristic grace, tablet tucked against her chest, every inch the consummate professional. Mr. Lawson, she said, her voice carrying that slight musical lilt that seemed more pronounced when she was pleased about something. The London office is on the line. They're saying it's urgent, something about the Westminster property acquisition. Bentley stood, straightening his tie with practiced movements. Thank you, Ms. Sawyer. I'll take it in my office. He nodded to Marcus. We'll continue this discussion later. I'm sure we will, Marcus replied, not bothering to hide his knowing smile. As Bentley strode toward the elevator, Mabel efficiently gathered his untouched lunch plates. Should I have Isabella send up something lighter to your office, Mr. Lawson? You've barely eaten all week. The genuine concern in her voice made his chest tighten. No, thank you, Ms. Sawyer. I'll grab something later. She frowned slightly, and he knew she was mentally cataloguing his recent eating habits, probably preparing to schedule a medical checkup if the pattern continued. Always 3 steps ahead, his Mabel. Except she wasn't his, could never be his. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, and Bentley stepped in, forcing himself not to look back. If he had, he might have seen what Marcus noticed. The way Mabel's professional mask slipped for just a moment as she watched him leave. The longing in her dark eyes, the slight tremor in her hands as she gathered his plates. Marcus watched this familiar dance with growing frustration. He'd known Bentley since their first day at Stanford, had watched him build an empire from his family's modest real estate business. He'd seen his friend take incredible risks in business, trust his instincts when every analyst said he was wrong. But this careful dance of denial and desire was slowly eating away at both of them. "Ms. Sawyer," Marcus called out as Mabel turned to leave. "A moment, if you would." She approached his table with perfect professionalism, though her eyes darted briefly to the elevator where Bentley had disappeared. "Yes, Mr. Chen, how can I help you?" "Join me?" He gestured to the empty chair. "There's something I'd like to discuss about the Asian market expansion." For a moment, he thought she might decline. Her schedule was typically packed tighter than a congressional hearing. But after a brief hesitation, she sat, arranging herself with that innate elegance that seemed to follow her every movement. "I've been reviewing the preliminary reports," she began, but Marcus held up a hand. "This isn't about business, Mabel. At least not the kind that shows up on quarterly reports." She stilled, her expression carefully neutral. "I'm not sure I understand, Mr. Chen." "Marcus, please, we've worked together for 3 years. He studied her face, seeing now what his friend saw, the quiet strength, the sharp intelligence behind those expressive eyes. "How long are you two going to keep this up?" "I'm afraid I don't follow." "You're both brilliant people," Marcus said quietly, "but watching you dance around each other is becoming painful. Someone needs to make the first move, and we both know it won't be him." A flash of something, pain, longing, crossed her features before being smoothly concealed. "Mr. Chen, Marcus, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Mr. Lawson and I have a purely professional relationship. And that's why your hands shake every time he stands too close, why he can't eat when you're in the room because he's too busy watching you, why both of you look at each other like you're dying of thirst, and the other is water." Color bloomed high on her cheekbones, but her voice remained steady. "Even if what you're suggesting were true, which it isn't, it would be completely inappropriate. I've worked too hard to be taken seriously in this world to become another corporate cliché." "Is that what you think you'd be?" "It's what everyone would think." She straightened her already perfect posture. "The assistant sleeping her way to the top, the CEO taking advantage of his subordinate. Pick your headline, they're all equally destructive." Marcus leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "You know him better than anyone, Mabel. Do you really think Bentley Lawson gives a damn about headlines?" "No," she admitted softly. "But I do. Because every woman who comes after me, every minority fighting to be taken seriously in the corporate world, they'll all be affected by the choices I make. Sometimes personal happiness has to take a back seat to the bigger picture. And if the bigger picture includes 2 people denying themselves a chance at happiness because they're both too noble for their own good." Mabel stood, smoothing her skirt with hands that trembled slightly. "The London office is waiting for Mr. Lawson. I should go make sure he has everything he needs for the call." "Of course." Marcus watched her gather herself, the professional mask sliding back into place. "Just remember, Mabel, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit what we want." She paused, looking down at him with those intelligent eyes. "What we want isn't always what's right, Marcus. You of all people should understand that." As she walked away, her heels clicking a precise rhythm on the marble floor, Marcus shook his head. 2 brilliant people, both too honorable, too concerned with doing the right thing to see that sometimes the right thing and the heart's desire could be one and the same. The afternoon sun continued its arc across the Chicago sky, painting shadows through the dining room's windows. Below, the city hummed with life and commerce, oblivious to the quiet drama playing out in its glass towers. And somewhere 46 floors up, 2 hearts beat in syncopated longing, while their owners maintained their careful distance, each believing they were protecting the other from something that might actually save them both. Marcus finished his lunch in thoughtful silence, watching the play of light and shadow across the lake. He'd seen his friend weather market crashes and hostile takeovers, had watched him build an empire with nothing but guts and brilliance. But this careful dance of denial between 2 people so obviously meant for each other, this might be what finally brought the great Bentley Lawson to his knees. The question was, when they finally stopped dancing around each other, would it be too late? Or would it be the beginning of something even greater than the empire they'd built together? Only time would tell, and in the meantime the dance continued, set to the rhythm of heartbeats and elevator chimes, of professional courtesies and unspoken desires, of two souls recognizing each other but too afraid to acknowledge what they saw. Up in his office, Bentley stood at his window, phone pressed to his ear, half listening to London drone on about property values and market fluctuations. His eyes were fixed on the lake, its surface a mirror of everything he wanted but couldn't have. And 20 feet away, separated by glass and propriety, Mabel sat at her desk, her own heart echoing the same quiet longing, while Chicago's afternoon light painted them both in shades of gold and shadow. Chapter 3. The Birthday Deception. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and silver as Bentley stood at his penthouse windows, watching night descend over Chicago. His reflection stared back at him, accusing in its clarity. The plan had seemed so simple in his mind, an intimate dinner, a chance to finally speak honestly. But first, he needed a reason to see her outside the office walls that kept them safely distant. The week had been a torture of almost moments. Brushed fingers as she handed him documents, shared glances across conference rooms, the scent of her perfume lingering in his office long after she'd left. Each interaction wound the tension tighter until he felt he might snap from the strain of maintaining their careful professional distance. His phone buzzed. Another message from Marcus. "Did you do it yet?" Bentley's jaw clenched as he typed back, "Working on it." The response was immediate. Coward. He couldn't argue with that assessment. Here he was, the man who'd built a billion-dollar empire, afraid to have an honest conversation with the woman who'd become the center of his world. The irony wasn't lost on him. The penthouse felt cavernous in its emptiness, the modern furniture and expensive art doing nothing to warm the space. But in his mind's eye, he could see her here, Mabel's warmth filling these rooms, her laugh echoing off the high ceilings, her presence making this sterile showcase finally feel like home. The elevator chimed, announcing a visitor. Bentley's heart jumped before he remembered. It was just the cleaning service, yet another reminder that he needed to act, needed to break this stalemate before it drove him mad. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow, he would take the first step. The morning arrived with Chicago's typical autumn crispness, the lake breeze carrying hints of winter's approach. Bentley arrived at the office earlier than usual, knowing Mabel would already be there. She always was. He found her at her desk, illuminated by the rising sun. She wore deep burgundy today, the color rich against her skin, and her hair was swept up in one of those elegant styles that made his fingers itch to discover how it would fall loose around her shoulders. "Ms. Sawyer," he called, proud of how steady his voice remained, despite the hammering of his heart. She looked up, that professional smile in place. "Good morning, Mr. Lawson. You're in early. The Barrett proposal isn't due until next week. Actually, I wanted to discuss something else." He moved closer to her desk, fighting the urge to fidget with his tie. "I'm hosting a small gathering at my penthouse this Saturday." Interest flickered in her eyes. In 3 years, he'd never hosted a personal event. "Oh, a birthday celebration for my niece." The lie tasted bitter, but he forced himself to continue. "Would you mind helping with the arrangements?" Mabel's face lit up with genuine warmth, and guilt twisted in his stomach. "Of course, Mr. Lawson. I didn't realize you had a niece. How old is she?" 16. Another lie. He didn't have a niece, had no siblings to give him one. Each falsehood felt like a betrayal of the trust they'd built. She was already pulling up her tablet, efficiency personified. "I'll handle everything." "What's her name? Any particular interests we should incorporate into the theme?" The questions he should have anticipated. "Alexandra," he said, the name coming from nowhere. She's interested in art, photography, specifically. Mabel nodded, making notes. We could incorporate that into the decorations, perhaps a gallery wall of her work. And for the menu, teenagers can be particular. Does she have any favorite foods? Each question drove the knife of guilt deeper. She's not picky. Simple elegance would be best. Of course. What time should I arrive to help set up? 7 would be perfect. He forced himself to meet her eyes, wondering if she could see the deception in his. I'll take care of everything, she assured him, already typing rapidly on her tablet. Leave it to me. The genuine enthusiasm in her voice made him want to confess everything right there. Instead, he retreated to his office, feeling like the worst kind of coward. Throughout the day, he watched her throw herself into the party planning with characteristic thoroughness. She contacted high-end caterers, researched photography-themed decorations, and coordinated with his building's security about guest access. Each detail she perfected was another weight on his conscience. Mr. Lawson. Her voice pulled him from his brooding late that afternoon. I've put together some options for the cake. Since Alexandra is interested in photography, I thought we could do something with an antique camera theme. The pastry chef I spoke with has experience with these artistic designs. She laid out several sketches on his desk, each more thoughtful and elegant than the last. The care she put into every detail, all for a celebration that didn't exist, made him feel physically ill. These are perfect, he managed. Choose whichever you think best. Are you sure? It's your niece's birthday. You must have some preference. The concern in her voice, the genuine desire to make this perfect for a girl who didn't exist, nearly broke him. I trust your judgment, Ms. Sawyer. You've never steered me wrong. She beamed at the praise, and he had to look away. What kind of man lies to the woman he loves? The rest of the week passed in a blur of preparations and guilt. Mabel coordinated everything with her usual efficiency, while Bentley watched and hated himself a little more with each passing day. Several times he almost called it off, almost told her the truth, but the thought of losing her completely kept him silent. Friday afternoon, she stopped by his office one last time. Everything's arranged for tomorrow. The caterers will arrive at 6, and I'll be there at 7 to help set up before the guests arrive at 8. The cake is beautiful. They really captured the vintage camera aesthetic. And the florist found these amazing arrangements that incorporate old film rolls into the design. Alexandra is going to love it. The pride in her voice, the genuine joy she took in creating this perfect celebration, made his chest ache. Thank you, Ms. Sawyer, this is above and beyond. Not at all. It's nice, actually. A soft smile played at her lips. Seeing this side of you, the doting uncle, it's humanizing. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on him. Will you need anything else tonight? He shook his head, not trusting his voice. Then I'll see you tomorrow at 7. She gathered her things, that smile still warming her features. Good night, Mr. Lawson. Good night, Ms. Sawyer. As she left, Bentley stood at his window, watching the city lights flicker to life. Tomorrow would change everything one way or another. Either he'd finally break through the walls they'd built between them, or he'd destroy the most important relationship in his life. The night passed in restless anticipation. Bentley paced his penthouse, alternating between justifying his actions and condemning them. By morning, he'd changed his mind a dozen times, but the thought of continuing this dance of denial for another day was unbearable. He spent the day in a state of controlled panic, checking and rechecking every detail. The dining room table was set for 2, with his finest china. Candles waited to be lit. A bottle of her favorite wine, noted during a business dinner 2 years ago, chilled in the wine fridge. At 6, He dismissed the caterers after they'd set up the intimate dinner he'd actually ordered, so different from the teenage birthday party Mabel expected. The florist's arrangements, elegant and simple, bore no resemblance to the whimsical designs she'd selected for his fictional niece. As 7 o'clock approached, Bentley stood at his windows, watching the city sparkle beneath him. Every light seemed to mock him, reminding him of the web of lies he'd woven, but it was too late to turn back now. The elevator chimed, and his heart stopped. Mabel stepped out, arms full of party supplies, her face glowing with excitement. She wore a deep blue dress he'd never seen before, elegant and understated, clearly chosen to be professional, yet festive for a teenage birthday party. "Mr. Lawson," her voice carried through the darkness. "Why are all the lights off?" "In here," he called from the living room, his voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos in his chest. She followed his voice, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors. The moment she entered the room, he saw the confusion register on her face. No decorations, no photography theme, just a table set for two, candlelight casting intimate shadows. "I don't understand." Her eyes swept the room, taking in every detail that didn't match her careful plans. "Where's everyone else? The caterers, the cake." A pause. "Your niece." The moment of truth had arrived. Bentley forced himself to meet her gaze. "I don't have a niece, Mabel." The use of her first name made her inhale sharply. The party supplies slipped from her grasp, hitting the floor with a soft thud that echoed in the silence. "What is this?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "The truth?" He stepped closer, close enough to see the confusion and something else, hurt, anger, in her eyes. "I'm a coward who couldn't find the courage to simply ask you to dinner." The silence that followed was deafening, filled with 3 years of unspoken words and carefully maintained distances. Chicago's lights twinkled beyond the windows, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the glass tower above them, while two hearts beat in synchronized fear of what would come next. Chapter 4. The Empty Penthouse. The party supplies scattered across the floor between them like fallen soldiers, streamers in teenage-friendly colors, photography-themed decorations, and a handmade banner that would never be hung. Mabel stared at them, focusing on the tangible evidence of her wasted efforts rather than the man standing before her, rather than the intimate tableau he'd arranged instead. The penthouse stretched vast and silent around them, 47 floors above Chicago's bustling streets. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sparkled like scattered diamonds on black velvet, but neither of them noticed its beauty. The space between them crackled with tension, with 3 years of carefully maintained professional distance suddenly shattered by this deception. "Mr. Lawson?" Her voice wavered slightly, the professional title a shield she clung to. "Bentley," he corrected softly. "I think, given the circumstances, we can drop the formalities." She shook her head, taking a step backward. Her heel caught one of the fallen streamers, and she had to catch herself against the wall. The momentary loss of composure seemed to anger her more than his deception. "The circumstances?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "You mean the circumstances where you lied to me? Created an elaborate fiction about a niece who doesn't exist? Had me spend an entire week planning a party that was never going to happen?" Each question landed like a physical blow, but Bentley forced himself to stand his ground. "Yes." "Why?" Such a simple question, demanding such a complicated answer. He moved toward the windows, needing the distance to think clearly. The city spread before him, a testament to power and possibility, yet he'd never felt more powerless than in this moment. "Because every time I tried to find the right words, they slipped away," he finally said. "Because every morning I walked into that office planning to tell you how I felt, and every evening I left, having failed again. Because the thought of losing you completely was worse than the torture of having you at arm's length, So you chose deception instead. The hurt in her voice cut deeper than anger would have. 3 years, Mr. Lawson. 3 years I've defended you to everyone who said you were just another entitled CEO. He's different, I said. He has integrity. The echo of her earlier words to Marcus twisted in his chest. I do have integrity, Mabel. In everything else, every deal, every contract, every negotiation, I've never lied. Only with this, only with you. And that makes it better. She pushed away from the wall, anger giving her movements a fluid grace that captivated him despite the circumstances. Do you have any idea what this week has been like? Watching you pretend to care about party details, seeing this supposed softer side of you that I thought I was finally being allowed to glimpse. Her words hit him with the force of revelation. Of course, she'd seen this fake party as a chance to know him better, to see beyond the corporate mask, and he'd twisted that opportunity into another lie. I'm sorry, he said softly. I never meant... To what? To hurt me? To make me feel like a fool? She gestured at the scattered supplies. Do you know how much thought I put into every detail? The cake design that incorporated vintage cameras because your fictional niece loved photography. The special arrangements with security to handle teenage guests in a high-security building. The hours spent researching age-appropriate entertainment that wouldn't bore the adults. Each detail she listed was another indictment of his cowardice. The candlelight caught the unshed tears in her eyes, making them sparkle like the city lights beyond the windows. I wanted it to be perfect, she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, because it was the first time you'd trusted me with something personal, something beyond contracts and mergers. And it was all a lie. Not everything was a lie. He took a step toward her, then stopped when she tensed. The trust is real, Mabel. You're the only person I trust completely. Except to tell me the truth. The bitter irony in her voice made him wince. I told myself it was better this way. That a quiet dinner would give us a chance to talk honestly, away from the office and expectations. That once we were here, the right words would finally come. And did they? She lifted her chin, challenge glinting in her eyes. Now that you've orchestrated this perfect moment through deception, have you found those elusive words? The city hummed below them, a distant symphony of life and movement that contrasted sharply with the frozen tableau in the penthouse. Bentley looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the elegant blue dress she'd chosen so carefully for a celebration that would never happen, the way the candlelight played across her features, the hurt and anger and something else, something deeper in her eyes. I love you, he said simply. The words he'd held back for so long fell into the space between them like stones into still water. I've loved you for so long, I can't remember what it felt like not to love you. She inhaled sharply, color flooding her cheeks. Don't. It's the truth. The only truth that matters. Now that he'd started, the words wouldn't stop. I love the way you anticipate problems before they arise. The way you handle difficult people with such grace. The way you remember every detail about everyone, from the board members' grandchildren's names to the security guard's favorite coffee order. Please stop. Her voice shook. I love watching you work, seeing that brilliant mind of yours tackle each challenge. I love that you're the first person I want to share good news with, and the only person I trust to help me through the bad. I love... Stop. The word exploded from her with such force that they both flinched. You don't get to do this. You don't get to lie to me for a week, and then stand there declaring your love like some romantic hero. Then tell me what I should do. He spread his hands in supplication. Tell me how to fix this. Fix this? She laughed, but the sound held no humor. You can't fix deception with more pretty words, Mr. Lawson. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. Give me a chance to try. He took another step toward her, encouraged when she didn't retreat. One honest conversation. That's all I'm asking for. We've had thousands of conversations. Professional ones, yes, safe ones. Conversations with carefully maintained boundaries and professional titles. He gestured to the city beyond the windows. But out there, beyond these glass walls and corporate masks, we could be so much more. Could we? Her voice was soft, thoughtful. Or would we destroy everything we've built? 3 years of trust and respect and professional accomplishment, all gone because you couldn't be honest with me from the start. The question hung between them, heavy with possibility and regret. Chicago's lights continued their eternal dance, casting shifting shadows across the penthouse floor, across the scattered remnants of a party that would never happen, across two people standing on the precipice of something that could either save or destroy them. I don't have an answer, Bentley admitted finally. I only know that continuing as we have been is slowly killing me. Every morning I walk into that office knowing you'll be there, perfect and professional, and just out of reach. Every evening I leave wondering if this will be the day someone else realizes how extraordinary you are and takes you away. I'm not a possession to be taken, she reminded him sharply. No, you're not. You're a brilliant, independent woman who could run circles around half my executive board, which is exactly why the thought of losing you terrifies me. The honesty in his voice seemed to reach her. Some of the tension left her shoulders, though wariness remained in her eyes. Why this elaborate deception? Why not simply ask me to dinner? Would you have said yes? The question stopped her short. She looked away, out at the city lights, and he saw the answer in her profile before she spoke. No, she admitted quietly. I wouldn't have. Why not? She turned back to him, and the pain in her eyes made his chest ache. Because I've worked too hard to be taken seriously in this world. Because the moment people found out, every promotion, every achievement would be questioned. She slept her way to the top. The whispers have already started just because you treat me with respect. Since when do you care what people whisper? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She moved to the windows, placing one hand against the glass, as if trying to draw strength from the city below. Since I fell in love with my boss and couldn't trust myself to make rational decisions anymore. The confession hung in the air between them, unexpected and explosive. Mabel's eyes widened as if she couldn't believe the words had escaped. She pressed her hand to her mouth, but it was too late. The truth was out, floating in the candlelit penthouse like a living thing. Bentley felt as if all the air had been sucked from the room. He stared at her reflection in the window, at the mixture of vulnerability and defiance in her expression, and felt the world shift beneath his feet. The city continued its eternal dance below them, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the glass tower above. Two hearts beat in synchronized fear and hope, while the scattered party supplies lay forgotten on the floor, silent witnesses to a deception that had somehow led to truth. Chapter 5. Confrontation. The confession hung in the air like suspended crystal, fragile and sharp-edged. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago's lights blurred and refocused, matching the chaos in Mabel's heart. She hadn't meant to say those words, hadn't meant to ever speak that truth aloud, yet here it was, impossible to take back. Slowly, deliberately, she turned from the window to face Bentley. His expression was unreadable, a mix of emotions she'd never seen on his usually controlled features. The distance between them seemed both vast and microscopic, charged with 3 years of unspoken feelings. "Mabel," he started, taking a step toward her. "Don't." She held up a hand, needing distance to think clearly. The party supplies still scattered across the floor caught her eye, physical evidence of his deception. Anger surged back, a welcome shield against vulnerability. "You lied to me." Yes. He didn't try to deny it, and somehow that made it worse. Was any of it real? She gestured to the elegant table setting, the carefully chosen wine, the intimate lighting. Or was this all just another corporate strategy, another deal to be closed? The accusation hit home. She saw it in the way he flinched. "How can you think that? How can I not?" Her laugh was bitter, edged with hurt. "You're Bentley Lawson. Everything you do is calculated, strategic. Why should this be any different?" He ran a hand through his hair, messing up its usual perfect styling. "You think I calculated this? You think I wanted to lie to you, to make myself sick with guilt every time you showed me another thoughtful detail for a party that would never happen? Then why did you?" The question burst from her with more force than intended. "Some kind of power play. Get your assistant alone in your apartment." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Bentley's expression hardened, pain etching itself across his features. "You think that's who I am? I don't know who you are anymore." Her voice shook despite her efforts to control it. 3 years, I've defended you to everyone who said you were just another entitled CEO. "He's different," I said. "He has integrity." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the penthouse. "I guess they were right after all." "Is that really what you believe?" He moved closer, his presence magnetic even in her anger. "After everything we've been through together, everything we've built, you think I'm just another corporate predator? I don't know what to believe anymore." She turned back to the window, using the city lights to ground herself. "You created an elaborate lie just to get me here. How am I supposed to trust anything you say now? Look at me." His voice was soft, but commanding. When she didn't move, he tried again. "Please, Mabel. Look at me." Slowly she turned. He stood closer than she'd realized, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes, the slight stubble on his jaw that spoke of a long day. "You want truth?" His voice was raw, stripped of its usual polish. "I've spent 2 years trying to find the right way to tell you how I feel. 2 years watching you excel at everything you touch, making my chaotic world run with perfect precision. 2 years falling deeper in love with your brilliant mind and beautiful heart." "Don't," she started, but he pressed on. "I've drafted resignation letters a dozen times, thinking it would be easier to walk away than love you in silence another day. I've sat through board meetings unable to focus because you wear that blue dress that makes your eyes shine like sapphires. I've fought the urge to touch you every time you hand me a file, every time you lean over my desk to point out something in a report." "Stop." Her voice cracked on the word. "I can't stop. Not anymore." He reached for her hand and she let him take it, her fingers trembling against his. "I love you, Mabel Sawyer. Inappropriately, completely, and with absolutely no strategic planning involved." The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because you're Bentley Lawson." She pulled her hand free, needing distance to think clearly. "CEO of Lawson Enterprises, king of the Chicago business world. And I'm the most brilliant woman I've ever met." He cut her off. "Harvard Business School graduate. The person who's kept my company running smoothly for 3 years. The woman who makes better strategic decisions before breakfast than most of my board members make all day. That's not how the world will see it." She gestured to the city beyond the windows. "Out there, I'll just be another cliché, the secretary sleeping with the boss." "Since when do you care what out there thinks?" He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "The Mabel Sawyer I know has never let anyone else's opinions dictate her choices." "That was before," the words exploded from her, "before I fell in love with you and had to question every decision, every interaction. Before I had to work twice as hard to prove I earned every promotion, every responsibility. Before I started dreading board meetings, because sitting across from you for hours, pretending you were just my boss, felt like dying by inches. The confession hung between them, raw and honest, in a way her earlier admission hadn't been. Bentley stared at her, something like wonder crossing his features. "You love me." His voice was barely a whisper. "Of course I love you, you impossible man." She threw up her hands in frustration. "How could I not? You're brilliant and driven and surprisingly kind when you think no one's looking. You remember every employee's birthday and pretend you don't. You donate millions to education programs in underprivileged areas, but refuse to let anyone publicize it. You—" Her words were cut off by his lips crashing into hers. For a moment she froze, caught between wanting to push him away and needing to pull him closer. Then his hands cupped her face with impossible gentleness, and all thoughts of resistance melted away. The kiss was everything she'd imagined and nothing like her dreams. It was coffee-flavored desperation and mint-tinged hope, 3 years of longing compressed into a single moment. His fingers trembled against her skin, betraying that the great Bentley Lawson was just as affected as she was. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, the world seemed to have shifted on its axis. Chicago's lights sparkled beyond the windows, but they felt distant, unimportant, compared to the way Bentley was looking at her. "I'm sorry," he whispered, resting his forehead against hers. "I'm sorry for lying, for not having the courage to simply tell you how I felt. You deserve better than deception." "Yes, I do." She pulled back slightly, needing to see his face. "And you deserve better than someone who's been hiding their feelings behind professional courtesy for 3 years. A smile tugged at his lips. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? A cautionary tale in corporate romance." But she was smiling too, despite herself. "Is that what this is? Romance?" The uncertainty in his voice made her heart twist. This was Bentley Lawson as she'd never seen him, vulnerable, unguarded, waiting for her answer, as if it held the key to his entire world. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "I just know that I'm tired of pretending. Tired of maintaining professional distance when all I want is to be close to you. Tired of acting like my heart doesn't race every time you say my name." "Mabel," he breathed, and yes, there was that flutter in her chest. "But I'm also scared," she continued. "Scared of losing everything I've worked for. Scared of becoming another corporate gossip story. Scared of losing you completely if this goes wrong." He brushed a thumb across her cheek, catching a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. What if it goes right? The question hung between them, full of possibility and promise. Beyond the windows, Chicago continued its eternal dance of light and shadow, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the glass tower above. But in that moment, wrapped in the warmth of Bentley's arms, Mabel felt like they were the only two people in the world who mattered. The scattered party supplies still lay forgotten on the floor, silent witnesses to a deception that had somehow led to truth. And as Bentley drew her in for another kiss, slower and sweeter than the first, Mabel realized that sometimes the most beautiful truths emerge from the messiest lies. Chapter 6. The Truth Breaks. The storm outside was building, dark clouds gathering over Chicago's skyline like harbingers of change. Inside the penthouse, Bentley felt like he'd been struck by lightning. Mabel's words echoed in his mind, impossible yet undeniable. "You love me?" His voice was barely a whisper, filled with wonder and disbelief. "Loved," Mabel corrected, though her heart screamed at the lie. Past tense. The word hit him like a physical blow. He laughed, but the sound was hollow, edged with pain. "I've spent 2 years trying to find the right way to tell you how I feel." His hands clenched at his sides. "Instead, I managed to destroy everything in one night. Why didn't you just tell me?" Her voice was soft, vulnerable in a way he'd never heard before. He moved to the windows, watching the storm clouds roll in. "Because you're extraordinary, Mabel. You could run circles around half my executive board. I didn't want you to think I was another cliché, the boss pursuing his secretary. So instead you lied." She stepped closer, anger flashing in her eyes. "Created this elaborate deception." She gestured to the romantic table setting, the carefully chosen wine. "That's so much worse." Lightning flickered across the sky, illuminating his tortured expression. I know it was wrong. But every time I tried to find the right words, all I could think about was losing you completely." "And now?" The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. "Now?" He turned to face her, raw honesty in his expression. "Now, I've probably lost you anyway. The irony isn't lost on me." Thunder rumbled overhead as Mabel wrapped her arms around herself. "You haven't lost me," she admitted softly, surprising them both. His head snapped up, hope flickering in his eyes. "What?" "If I'm being honest, and apparently that's what we're doing now, you could never lose me completely." She moved to the windows, her reflection overlaying the stormy cityscape. "That's what terrifies me most. No matter what you do, no matter how angry or hurt I am, there's a part of me that will always belong to you." The confession hung between them, electric as the lightning outside. Bentley took a cautious step toward her. "Why does that frighten you?" "Because I've worked so hard to be independent, to stand on my own merits." She turned to face him, tears glistening in her eyes. "The thought of being so completely bound to another person, especially my boss, goes against everything I've built my life around." "You think loving someone makes you less independent?" "In our world." "Yes." She gestured to the city beyond the windows. "The moment anyone finds out about us, everything changes. Every promotion, every achievement will be questioned. People will assume I slept my way to the top." "Since when do you care what people assume?" "Since it started affecting more than just me." The words exploded from her with unexpected force. "Do you have any idea how many young women look up to me? How many minorities in corporate America watch my career as proof that it's possible to succeed on merit alone?" Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You're worried about letting them down." "I'm worried about reinforcing every stereotype I've spent my career fighting against." She moved to the elegant table he'd set, running a finger along the fine china. The female executive sleeping with her boss. The minority who only advanced through sexual favors rather than talent. "Anyone who knows you knows that's ridiculous." "Is it?" She whirled to face him. "You've never had to prove yourself the way I have. Never had to work twice as hard just to be taken half as seriously. Never had your every achievement questioned because of how you look or who you love." The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. He'd known abstractly about the challenges she faced, had even admired how gracefully she handled them, but hearing the pain in her voice, seeing the weight she carried, it made his heart ache. "You're right," he said quietly, moving closer. "I can't fully understand what you've been through. But I know who you are, Mabel. Your strength, your brilliance, your uncompromising integrity. Those aren't things anyone can take from you, regardless of who you choose to love." Thunder crashed overhead, making the crystal glasses on the table vibrate. The storm had reached them fully now, rain pelting against the windows in sheets. "And what if loving you destroys everything I've built?" Her voice was barely audible over the storm. "What if it makes everything stronger?" He closed the distance between them slowly, giving her time to retreat if she chose. "What if we could build something even greater together?" "That's a big risk. The biggest risks bring the greatest rewards." He smiled slightly. "You taught me that, remember? I was talking about market expansion. I'm talking about us." He reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. Yes, there will be challenges. Yes, people will talk. But since when has Mabel Sawyer let other people's opinions stop her from doing what she knows is right? Lightning illuminated his face, showing her the sincerity in his eyes, the vulnerability in his expression. This wasn't the polished CEO she knew from the office. This was just Bentley, raw, honest, and completely in love with her. "I'm still angry about the lie," she said, but there was less heat in her voice. "I know. I'll spend as long as it takes making it up to you." "And what about work? The board, the media when they inevitably find out? We'll face it together." His free hand came up to cup her cheek. Unless you really want to walk away. If you truly believe we can go back to how things were, I'll respect your decision." The thought of returning to their careful professional distance made her chest ache. "I don't think I can go back," she admitted. "Not now that I know what your kisses taste like." Hope bloomed in his eyes. "Then don't go back. Move forward with me." Another crack of thunder shook the penthouse, but neither of them noticed. They were lost in each other's eyes, standing on the precipice of something that could either save or destroy them both. "I'm scared," Mabel whispered. "So am I." He pressed his forehead to hers. "But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of facing whatever comes next." The storm continued to rage outside, but in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms, they found their own kind of peace. The scattered party supplies still lay forgotten on the floor, silent witnesses to a deception that had led them here, to this moment of raw truth and newfound hope. "Kiss me again," Mabel said softly. And as their lips met, gentle and questioning and full of promise, the truth finally broke between them like a dam giving way. In its wake, they found something stronger than professional boundaries, more powerful than corporate hierarchies. They found each other wholly and completely, with all their flaws and fears and endless possibilities. Chapter 7. The storm breaks. The thunder rolled across Chicago's skyline with increasing intensity, each crash seeming to shake the very foundations of the glass tower. Rain lashed against the windows in horizontal sheets, transforming the city lights into watery, impressionist paintings. Inside the penthouse, Mabel and Bentley stood in the aftermath of their second kiss, both breathless with the weight of what had just transpired. Mabel's fingers pressed against her lips, still tingling from the contact. The professional mask she'd worn for 3 years lay shattered at her feet, alongside the scattered party supplies and her carefully maintained defenses. She moved to leave, needing space to think, to breathe, to process the seismic shift in their relationship. Bentley caught her arm, his touch gentle but insistent. "Let me go." "I can't." His voice was raw, stripped of its usual corporate polish. "I've spent 3 years letting you go, every single day. I'm done." Lightning flashed, illuminating the desperation in his eyes. Mabel pulled her arm free, anger flaring again. "You don't get to decide that." "Don't I get any say in this?" He followed her as she paced toward the windows. "We've both admitted how we feel. Why are you still running? Because you don't get to lie to me and then act like you're the wounded party." She whirled to face him, her reflection in the rain-streaked windows, creating the illusion of multiple Mabels, all equally furious. "You don't get to manipulate me into this situation and then demand I stay." Thunder cracked overhead, making the crystal glasses on the abandoned dinner table vibrate. Bentley ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "You're right. The deception was wrong. I handled everything wrong. But the feelings are real, Mabel. What's between us is real." "Is it?" She gestured to the elaborate setup around them. "Or is this just another corporate takeover? Another deal to be closed?" The accusation hit him like a physical blow. How can you think that, after everything we've been through together? Everything we've been through has been professional, is safe, bounded by corporate hierarchies and workplace protocols. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the trembling that had nothing to do with the storm outside. This is dangerous. Why? Because it's real. Because it forces us to acknowledge what we've both been feeling. Because it changes everything. The words exploded from her with unexpected force. The moment we cross this line, nothing will ever be the same. Every interaction, every decision, every promotion, it all becomes questionable. Lightning illuminated his face, showing her the pain her words caused. You think I'd ever compromise your professional standing? That I'd let anyone question your achievements? It doesn't matter what you'd let happen. The world will draw its own conclusions. She moved to the windows, watching the storm rage across the city. I've worked too hard to be seen as just another woman sleeping her way to the top. Is that really all you think this is? He stepped closer, his reflection appearing beside hers in the glass. A career move? No, she whispered, honesty forcing its way past her defenses. That's what terrifies me most. This isn't about career advancement or corporate politics. This is about my heart betraying everything my head knows is sensible. Thunder rolled again, closer this time, the storm directly overhead. The lights flickered ominously, shadows dancing across the penthouse floors. Tell me something, Bentley said softly, still watching her reflection. If I had simply asked you to dinner, would you have said yes? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Mabel stared out at the storm-racked city, remembering all the times she'd caught him watching her, all the moments their hands had brushed over document exchanges, all the late nights when professional boundaries had felt paper-thin. The silence stretched, broken only by the rhythmic pounding of rain against glass and the occasional rumble of thunder. Finally, she turned to face him. No, she admitted. I wouldn't have said yes. Why not? Because saying yes would have meant admitting this was real, that what I felt for you went beyond professional admiration and respect. She laughed, but the sound held no humor. It was easier to hide behind protocols and corporate etiquette than face the truth. And what is the truth, Mabel? Another flash of lightning illuminated the room, catching the unshed tears in her eyes. The truth is that I've been in love with you for so long I can't remember what it felt like not to love you. The truth is that every morning I walk into that office knowing I'll have to pretend you're just my boss. And every evening I leave feeling like I've spent the day holding my breath. Bentley stepped closer, drawn by the raw honesty in her voice. Then why are we still fighting this? Because love isn't enough. She gestured to the city beyond the windows. Out there, in the real world, there are consequences, reputations to consider, careers at stake. Since when has Mabel Sawyer let fear of consequences stop her? He reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. The woman I know, the woman I love, has never backed down from a challenge. This is different. But her voice wavered, uncertainty creeping in. Is it? Or are we both just hiding behind excuses because we're afraid of how right this feels? The lights flickered again, longer this time, before plunging the penthouse into darkness. In the dim city light filtering through the storm-lashed windows, they stood facing each other, hands still joined. I don't know how to do this, Mabel admitted softly. I don't know how to be your employee and your lover. I don't know how to separate professional decisions from personal feelings. Then we figure it out together. His thumb traced patterns on her palm, sending shivers up her arm. No more lies, no more hiding, just us, facing whatever comes next as partners. Partners? She raised an eyebrow, barely visible in the darkness. Is that what we are? We've always been partners, Mabel. In the office, in business decisions, in building this company to what it is today. He tugged her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. The only difference now is that we can stop pretending that's all we are to each other. Thunder crashed overhead, but neither of them flinched. They were lost in each other's eyes, standing on the precipice of something that could either complete or destroy them. If we do this, Mabel said slowly, we do it right. No more lies, no more deceptions. Complete honesty, even when it's difficult. Agreed. And at work, nothing changes. I'm still your executive assistant, you're still my boss. Professional boundaries stay intact. During office hours, he amended, a smile tugging at his lips. I'm serious, Bentley. But she was fighting a smile too. This only works if we can keep the personal and professional separate. Whatever you need. He pressed his forehead to hers. I'd agree to anything to keep you in my life. The lights flickered back on, but neither of them moved. They stood in their intimate embrace, the storm raging outside while they found their own kind of peace within. We're really doing this? Mabel whispered, wonder and fear mingling in her voice. We're really doing this. Bentley's hand slid into her hair, cradling her head with infinite tenderness. No more hiding, no more pretending, just us, finally being honest about what we mean to each other. She leaned into his touch, years of careful distance melting away. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. He smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. But I think we've both proven we're up for a challenge. The storm continued its assault on Chicago's skyline, but inside the penthouse, two hearts had found their rhythm. The scattered party supplies still lay forgotten on the floor, silent witnesses to a deception that had led to truth, to a confrontation that had led to understanding, to a storm that had finally broken to reveal something beautiful beneath. As Bentley drew her in for another kiss, slower and deeper than the others, Mabel realized that sometimes the most dangerous paths led to the most wonderful destinations. The thunder rolled, the rain poured, and two souls finally found their way home in each other's arms. Chapter 8. Truths in the Dark. A power surge rippled through Chicago's Gold Coast, the storm's intensity finally overwhelming the city's electrical grid. The penthouse plunged into darkness, leaving Bentley and Mabel illuminated only by the intermittent flashes of lightning and the dim glow of the city lights filtering through the rain-streaked windows. In the sudden darkness, their other senses heightened. Mabel could hear Bentley's steady breathing, could feel the warmth radiating from his body, though they stood feet apart. The air between them felt charged, electric, with unspoken words and newly acknowledged feelings. "No," she finally answered his earlier question, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wouldn't have said yes." "Why not?" His voice came from somewhere closer than before, though she hadn't heard him move. Lightning flashed, freezing him in mid-step, his expression a study in intensity. In that brief illumination, she saw everything she'd been trying to deny, the love in his eyes, the vulnerability in his stance, the hope and fear warring across his features. "Because I've worked too hard to be taken seriously in this world." The words came easier in the darkness, as if the lack of light granted permission for honesty. Because the moment people found out, every promotion, every achievement would be questioned. She laughed bitterly. "She slept her way to the top. I've heard them whisper it already, just because you treat me with respect." Thunder rolled overhead, and Mabel felt it vibrate through the floor beneath her feet. "Do you know what they say in the break room? What they whisper when they think I can't hear? No wonder she gets all the best assignments. Have you seen how the CEO looks at her? Since when do you care what people whisper?" Bentley's voice was closer now, though still cloaked in shadow. "Since I fell in love with my boss and couldn't trust myself to make rational decisions anymore." The confession echoed in the darkness, bouncing off marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. Lightning flashed again, revealing them standing mere inches apart, the truth finally laid bare between them. Rational? Bentley's laugh was soft, tinged with something like wonder. You want rational? I've had board members suggest replacing you because you're too influential, because I trust your judgment more than theirs. Another flash of lightning, another glimpse of his face as he continued. I've sat through meetings unable to focus because you wear that damn blue dress that makes your eyes shine. I've drafted resignation letters 12 times, thinking it would be easier to walk away than love you in silence another day. Stop. But her protest was weak, her hand reaching for him in the darkness. No. His fingers found hers, intertwining with a certainty that belied the chaos around them. You want truth? Here it is. I love you, Mabel Sawyer. Inappropriately, completely, and with absolutely no rational thought involved. The power tried to surge back, lights flickering briefly before plunging them into darkness once more. In that brief illumination, Mabel saw the scattered party supplies still lying where they'd fallen, physical evidence of the deception that had led them here. But somehow, in the darkness, those lies seemed less important than the truths finally being spoken. Do you know when I first knew? His voice was soft, reflective. It was that day in Singapore, during the merger negotiations. You'd been up for 36 hours straight, coordinating between time zones, keeping everything running smoothly. I walked into the conference room at dawn and found you asleep at the table, surrounded by documents, your hair falling out of that elegant twist you always wear. Another flash of lightning, another glimpse of his face lost in the memory. You looked so human in that moment, so far from the perfect professional image you always maintain, and all I could think was that I wanted to see you like that every morning for the rest of my life. Mabel's breath caught. Why didn't you say something then? Because you woke up and immediately apologized for being unprofessional, started gathering the documents, fixing your hair, rebuilding those walls you keep so carefully maintained. His thumb traced patterns on her palm. I realized then that you needed those walls, that professional distance. Who was I to take that from you? And now, her voice wavered slightly. What changed? Nothing. Everything. Thunder punctuated his words. I finally realized that loving you in silence was slowly killing me. That pretending you were just my executive assistant was the biggest lie I've ever told, bigger than the birthday party deception, bigger than any corporate deal I've ever made. The storm seemed to intensify around them, rain lashing against the windows in horizontal sheets. But inside the penthouse, in the darkness that made honesty easier, two hearts beat in perfect synchronization. I've spent 3 years watching you, Mabel admitted softly. 3 years memorizing the way you take your coffee, black before noon, 1 sugar after. The way you loosen your tie 2 notches when you're stressed. The way your eyes crinkle at the corners when you're truly amused, not just being polite. Lightning flashed again, catching the smile that curved his lips. I thought I was being subtle. You were. I was just paying too much attention. She stepped closer, drawn by the warmth of him in the darkness. Do you know how many times I've had to stop myself from reaching out? From straightening your tie or brushing lint off your jacket? Such simple things, but they felt so dangerous. Because they would have been real, he finished for her. Not professional courtesy, but genuine care. Yes. The word was barely a breath between them. Every touch, every glance, every moment of genuine connection felt like playing with fire. His free hand found her waist in the darkness, pulling her closer. And now? Are we still playing with fire? Now we're burning? She tilted her face up to his, though she could barely see him in the darkness. and I'm terrified of the ashes we might become." Thunder crashed directly overhead, making the windows rattle in their frames, but neither of them flinched, too lost in the gravity pulling them together. "What if we don't burn to ashes?" His voice was rough with emotion. "What if we forge something stronger instead, like steel in a furnace, made stronger by the heat?" "Always the optimist," she teased, but there was wonder in her voice. "Only with you." His hand slid up to cup her cheek. "Only about us." The power surged again, lights flickering to life for a brief moment before dying once more. But in that instant, they saw each other clearly, all the love and fear and hope written plainly across their faces. "This changes everything," Mabel whispered. "No." Bentley's voice was firm. "This just makes official what's been true for years. We've always been more than boss and assistant. We've always been partners, equals, two halves of something greater than ourselves." "The board won't see it that way. The board sees what we show them." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "And what they'll see is the same brilliant, capable woman who's been running circles around them for years. The same uncompromising professional who's helped build this company into what it is today. And if they don't, then they lose us both." The certainty in his voice made her heart skip. "I meant what I said about those resignation letters, Mabel. If it comes down to choosing between you and this company, it's no choice at all. I won't let you give up everything you've built." "I'm not giving up anything." Lightning illuminated his smile. "I'm gaining everything that matters." The storm continued to rage outside, but in the darkness of the penthouse they found their own kind of peace. The truth had finally broken free between them, stripped of corporate masks and professional distance by the simple act of not being able to see each other clearly. "Kiss me," Bentley whispered, and this time there was no hesitation in Mabel's response. Their lips met in the darkness, finding each other with the certainty of stars aligning. This kiss was different from their earlier ones, slower, deeper, full of promises and possibilities. His hands tangled in her hair, finally freeing it from its elegant twist. Her fingers gripped his shirt, anchoring herself to him as the storm raged around them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, the power was still out. But somehow, in the darkness, they'd found their way to truth, to each other, to a future that seemed both terrifying and inevitable. "We're really doing this?" Mabel asked, wonder and fear mingling in her voice. "We're really doing this," Bentley confirmed, pressing his forehead to hers. "No more hiding, no more pretending. Just us, finally being honest about what we mean to each other." Outside, the storm began to ease, though the power remained out. In the penthouse, two hearts beat in perfect synchronization, while the scattered party supplies lay forgotten on the floor, silent witnesses to a deception that had somehow led to the purest truth of all. Chapter 9. Breaking Point. The confession hung in the air between them like suspended crystal, fragile and sharp-edged. Through the darkness of the powerless penthouse, Bentley could barely make out Mabel's features, but he could feel the tension radiating from her body, could hear the slight tremor in her breathing that betrayed her emotional state. He stepped closer, close enough to see the tears she was fighting back, illuminated by the occasional flash of lightning through the windows. The storm outside had begun to ease, but the storm between them was reaching its crescendo. "You want rational." His voice was rough with emotion. "I've had board members suggest replacing you because you're too influential, because I trust your judgment more than theirs. I've sat through meetings unable to focus because you wear that damn blue dress that makes your eyes shine. I've drafted resignation letters a dozen times, thinking it would be easier to walk away than love you in silence another day." "Stop!" She tried to step back, but his hands came up to frame her face, holding her gently in place. "No." The word was both gentle and firm. "You want truth? Here it is. I love you, Mabel Sawyer, inappropriately, completely, and with absolutely no rational thought involved. The power flickered briefly, giving him a glimpse of her expression. Vulnerable, afraid, and filled with a longing that matched his own. Then darkness fell again, but he could feel her trembling beneath his touch. "This can't happen," she whispered, even as her hands came up to grip his wrists, not pushing him away but holding on as if he were an anchor in a storm. "We can't happen." "Why not?" "Because it will destroy everything we've built. The company, our careers, the respect we've earned, or it could make it all stronger." His thumbs traced her cheekbones, wiping away tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. "Think about it, Mabel. Everything we've accomplished separately. Imagine what we could do together, without having to hide how we feel." Lightning flashed again, illuminating the war of emotions on her face. "It's not that simple, isn't it?" He pressed his forehead to hers, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. "We've spent 3 years pretending, 3 years maintaining professional distance while our hearts beat in sync. 3 years loving each other in silence. Isn't that harder than just being honest?" "Honesty?" She laughed, but the sound was watery. "Like the honest birthday party you invented?" "I know." Guilt colored his voice. "I know I went about this all wrong. But the feelings behind it, the desperation to finally bridge this gap between us, that was honest. That was real." Thunder rumbled in the distance, softer now, the storm moving away from the city, but in the penthouse, the air remained charged with electricity of a different kind. "Do you know what scares me most?" Mabel's voice was barely a whisper. "It's not the board's reaction, or office gossip, or even potential damage to my career. It's how much I want this, how completely I love you, despite everything telling me I shouldn't." The confession hit Bentley like a physical blow. His hands slid into her hair, freeing it from its elegant updo, needing to touch her, to ground himself in this moment. "Why shouldn't you love me?" His voice was rough with emotion. "Because I'm your boss? Because it might complicate things?" "Life is complicated, Mabel. Love is complicated. But that doesn't make it wrong." "No," she agreed softly. "But it makes it dangerous. More dangerous than denying ourselves happiness. More dangerous than spending our lives wondering what might have been." The power surged briefly again, long enough for them to see each other clearly. Mabel's hair fell in waves around her shoulders, Bentley's usual corporate polish completely undone. They looked at each other without masks or pretenses for perhaps the first time. "I'm tired," Mabel admitted. "Tired of pretending, tired of maintaining professional distance when all I want is to be close to you. Tired of acting like my heart doesn't race every time you say my name." "Then stop pretending." His hands slid down to her shoulders, warm through the silk of her dress. "Be real with me, Mabel. Be honest about what you want." "What I want?" She stepped closer, eliminating the last bit of space between them. "I want to stop questioning every interaction, analyzing every glance for hidden meaning. I want to be able to touch you without finding professional excuses. I want—" Her words were cut off by his lips crashing into hers. The kiss was different from their earlier ones. Desperate, hungry, years of denied passion finally breaking free. His hands tangled in her hair while hers gripped his shirt, pulling him closer as if they could erase 3 years of professional distance in a single moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, the city lights through the windows provided just enough illumination to see each other's faces. "I love you," Bentley said again, the words falling from his lips like a prayer. "Not as my assistant, not as a corporate asset, but as the brilliant, frustrating, beautiful woman who's completely transformed my world." Mabel's hands smoothed over his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. "This changes everything." "Only if we let it." He caught one of her hands, pressing it more firmly against his heart. At work, you're still the most competent executive assistant I've ever had. Nothing changes there, no favoritism, no special treatment. If anything, I'll be harder on you to prove there's no bias. And after hours? His smile was visible even in the dim light. After hours, we can finally be ourselves. No more pretending, no more professional distance, just us being honest about how we feel. The board will have questions. Let them question. His free hand traced the line of her jaw. Your work speaks for itself, Mabel. Your accomplishments, your intelligence, your dedication, those things are undeniable. Anyone who suggests otherwise will have to answer to me. I don't need you to defend me. I know. He smiled. That's one of the countless reasons I love you. You're the strongest person I know, Mabel Sawyer. You don't need anyone's protection or validation, but that doesn't mean you have to face everything alone anymore. Thunder rumbled again, more distant now, the storm moving away from the city. But in the penthouse, something else was breaking. Walls of professional distance, barriers of corporate propriety, all crumbling in the face of a love too powerful to deny any longer. "Kiss me again," Mabel whispered, and this time there was no hesitation in her voice. Bentley complied, pouring 3 years of longing into the kiss. His hands framed her face while hers slid up to tangle in his hair, messing it up further. They kissed like they were making up for lost time, like they were trying to speak every unspoken word through the press of lips and sweep of tongues. When they finally separated, both breathing heavily, the power suddenly returned. Light flooded the penthouse, revealing their disheveled state, Mabel's hair wild around her shoulders, Bentley's tie completely undone, both of them looking thoroughly kissed and utterly unrepentant. "No going back," Mabel said softly, though it wasn't quite a question. "No going back," Bentley confirmed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Only forward, together." The storm had passed, leaving Chicago washed clean in its wake. Through the windows, stars began to peek through breaks in the clouds, as if the universe itself was blessing this new beginning. The scattered party supplies still lay forgotten on the floor, but they no longer seemed like evidence of deception. Instead, they were stepping stones that had led them here, to this moment of perfect honesty, of walls finally broken, of love finally acknowledged. "We should probably talk about logistics," Mabel said, ever practical even as she remained in the circle of his arms. "HR protocols, disclosure forms." Bentley silenced her with another kiss, brief but tender. "Tomorrow. Tonight is just for us. No corporate policies, no professional considerations. Just you and me, finally being honest about what we mean to each other." And as she smiled up at him, radiant in the restored light, Bentley knew that every risk, every moment of uncertainty, even the ill-conceived birthday party deception, it had all been worth it to reach this breaking point, this moment of perfect clarity where love finally triumphed over fear. Chapter 10. The Fall. The kiss was inevitable as gravity. One moment they were staring at each other in the newly restored light. The next, his hands were in her hair and her fingers were gripping his shirt. It was anger and longing, frustration and need, 3 years of denial crashing down in a single moment that felt both eternal and far too brief. The city sparkled beyond the windows, cleaned fresh by the passing storm. Inside the penthouse, the air was charged with possibility and the lingering scent of rain that had blown in when Mabel had arrived, carrying party supplies for a celebration that would never happen. She pulled away first, breathing hard, her lips swollen from his kisses. "This is a mistake." "No!" Bentley pressed his forehead to hers, unwilling to let her retreat too far. "Every day I didn't tell you how I felt. Those were the mistakes." His hands were still tangled in her hair, which had completely escaped its elegant updo to fall in waves around her shoulders. She'd never looked more beautiful to him than in this moment. Professional polish undone, walls finally down. It will destroy everything we've built. But her hands hadn't left his chest, fingers still gripping his shirt as if she couldn't bear to let go. Or make it stronger. He traced her cheek with gentle fingers. You once told me the biggest risks bring the greatest rewards. I was talking about market expansion, but a smile tugged at her lips despite her words. I'm talking about us. His thumb brushed across her bottom lip, feeling it tremble beneath his touch. Everything worth having involves risk, Mabel. You taught me that. She leaned into his touch, eyes closing briefly. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. He smiled, drawing her closer. Every day for 3 years, I've watched you handle impossible situations with grace and intelligence. I've seen you turn potential disasters into opportunities, seen you navigate corporate politics with unfailing integrity. And now, her eyes opened, searching his face. How do we navigate this? Instead of answering immediately, Bentley led her to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Chicago spread before them, a glittering tapestry of lights and possibilities. His arms wrapped around her from behind, and she allowed herself to lean back against his chest. Do you remember the Morrison deal? His voice was soft near her ear. 2 years ago, when everyone said it was impossible. Of course. She smiled at the memory. The board was certain we'd fail. But you saw the potential. Stayed up 3 nights straight, finding a solution no one else had considered. His lips brushed her temple. That's when I first realized I was in love with you. She turned in his arms, surprised. What? You came into my office at dawn, exhausted but triumphant. Your hair was falling out of its usual perfect style, your blouse was wrinkled, and you had a coffee stain on your sleeve. His smile was tender with the memory, but your eyes were shining with victory as you laid out exactly how we could make the impossible deal work. I looked a mess, she protested, but he shook his head. You looked real, human, brilliant. His hands framed her face. That's when I knew I was in trouble, because I didn't just admire your professional capabilities anymore. I wanted to see you like that every morning. Wanted to be the one who brought you coffee and watched you change the world. Lightning flickered in the distance, the storm moving away from the city, but still visible over the lake. Mabel's hands came up to cover his on her face. Why didn't you say something then? Because you immediately apologized for your appearance, started trying to fix your hair, straighten your clothes. His thumbs stroked her cheeks. I realized how important those professional boundaries were to you, how hard you worked to maintain that perfect image. It was my armor, she admitted softly. Still is in many ways. I know. He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. That's why I tried so hard to respect those boundaries, even when it was killing me to keep my distance. She laughed softly. We've been quite a pair of fools, haven't we? The worst kind. The ones who think they're being noble. His smile was self-deprecating. Both of us so concerned with doing the right thing that we couldn't see that the right thing and the heart's desire could be one and the same. And now? She tilted her face up to his. What's the right thing now? In answer, he kissed her again. This time there was no hesitation, no holding back. His hands slid into her hair while hers moved up to cup his face. They kissed like they were making up for lost time, like they were trying to speak 3 years of unspoken words through the press of lips and sweep of tongues. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, the city lights seemed to shine brighter through the windows. Or perhaps that was just the joy making everything seem more luminous. I love you, Bentley said simply, not as my assistant, not as a corporate asset, but as the brilliant, frustrating, beautiful woman who's completely transformed my world. I love you too. The words came easier now, as if saying them once had broken down all barriers. Even when you make up fake birthday parties to get me alone. He had the grace to look sheepish. Not my finest moment. No, she agreed, but she was smiling. But it got us here. Here was still standing by the windows, his arms around her waist, her hands resting on his chest. The scattered party supplies still lay forgotten on the floor, but they no longer seemed like evidence of deception. Instead, they were stepping stones that had led them to this moment of perfect honesty. "What happens tomorrow?" Mabel asked, ever practical even as she snuggled closer into his embrace. "When we have to go back to the real world?" "Tomorrow we face reality together." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "We file the appropriate HR paperwork, maintain professional boundaries at work, and prove to everyone that we can be both excellent at our jobs and completely in love. And if they don't believe us, then they lose us both." The certainty in his voice made her heart skip. "I meant what I said earlier, Mabel. If it comes down to choosing between you and the company, it's no choice at all. I won't let you give up everything you've built." "I'm not giving up anything." He smiled down at her. "I'm gaining everything that matters." The storm had moved fully away from the city now, leaving the night sky clear and star-studded above them. Chicago's lights twinkled below, a mirror image of the heavens, while in the penthouse, two hearts beat in perfect synchronization. "Dance with me?" Bentley said suddenly. Mabel laughed. "There's no music." But he was already pulling her away from the windows, one hand on her waist, the other clasping hers. "We don't need music. We've been dancing around each other for 3 years. I think we know the steps by now." And so they danced, swaying gently in the middle of his penthouse, surrounded by the scattered remnants of a fake party that had somehow led to the most real thing either of them had ever known. The city lights painted patterns across the floor, creating their own kind of music in shadows and light. "This is insane," Mabel murmured against his chest. "Completely." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Gloriously, perfectly insane." They continued to move together, finding their rhythm as naturally as they did everything else. 3 years of working in perfect synchronization had taught them how to read each other, how to anticipate each other's movements. Now they were simply applying that knowledge to a different kind of dance. "No going back," Mabel said softly, echoing their earlier words. "No going back," Bentley agreed, pulling her closer. "Only forward, together." And as they danced in the starlight, both knew they were falling in love, falling into truth, falling into a future that seemed both terrifying and inevitable. But for the first time, they weren't fighting the fall. They were embracing it, trusting that whatever came next, they would face it together. Chapter 11. New dawn morning found them on Bentley's balcony, watching the sun rise over Lake Michigan. Mabel wore his shirt, hair wild from his fingers, while he stood behind her in just his trousers, arms wrapped around her waist. The city was waking up below them. But in their private sanctuary high above Chicago, time seemed to move at its own pace. The first rays of sunlight painted the lake in shades of gold and rose, a new day dawning in more ways than one. Mabel leaned back against Bentley's chest, feeling his heart beat steady and strong against her spine. "We need rules," she said, practical even in this intimate moment. "Anything." His lips brushed her temple. "I keep my job." She turned in his arms to face him, needing him to understand the importance of this. "No favoritism, no special treatment. If anything, you have to be harder on me than before." "Done." His eyes were serious despite his smile. "Though you should know, half the board already thinks I'm too hard on you. Marcus says I overcompensate to avoid showing favoritism." She raised an eyebrow. "And do you?" "Probably." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "It was easier to be strictly professional than risk revealing how I really felt." The sun continued its ascent, casting long shadows across the balcony. Below, the city was coming to life, traffic beginning to build on the streets, early morning joggers dotting the lakefront path. "We tell HR immediately," Mabel continued, "everything transparent and by the book. Already drafted the email." At her surprised look, he smiled. "I may have spent part of the night planning while you were sleeping." "Of course you did." She shook her head fondly. "Always the CEO, even at 4 in the morning. Someone has to be practical." His hands settled on her waist. "Though I seem to remember you making some very compelling arguments against practicality last night." Heat bloomed in her cheeks at the memory. "That's exactly why we need these rules. We have to prove we can separate personal and professional." "We will." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Though I reserve the right to admire you from afar during board meetings. As long as it stays from afar during office hours." But she was smiling. "I mean it, Bentley. Everything has to be completely above board. No lingering touches. No meaningful glances across conference rooms." "What about meaningless glances? Be serious." "I am serious." He caught her hands in his. "I understand what's at stake here, Mabel. Your reputation, your career, everything you've worked for. I won't jeopardize that." The sunrise had fully painted the sky now, turning the lake into a mirror of fire and gold. Mabel studied his face in the morning light, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, the quiet determination in his expression. And if it doesn't work? The question that had been haunting her finally escaped. If we crash and burn, then we crash and burn. He pulled her closer. "But at least we'll have been brave enough to try." She laid her head on his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. "I'm scared," she admitted softly. "Of what?" "Of how much I love you." The words were muffled against his skin. "Of how completely you've become part of my world. Of what happens if this all falls apart." His arms tightened around her. "Do you know what scares me?" She tilted her face up to look at him. "What?" "The thought of going back to how things were. Of pretending you're just my assistant. Of maintaining professional distance when all I want is to hold you like this." His voice was rough with emotion. "I've spent 3 years loving you in silence, Mabel. I can't go back to that." The sun had fully risen now, bathing them in golden light. The city hummed with life below, but on their private balcony they remained in their own world for a few moments longer. "One day at a time," Mabel said finally. "That's how we'll do this." "One day at a time," he agreed, "starting with HR paperwork." She laughed despite herself. "Very romantic." "I thought you wanted professional?" But his eyes sparkled with amusement. "Though I suppose I could make the paperwork filing more romantic. Candlelight in the HR office. Perhaps some soft music while we sign disclosure forms." "Stop!" But she was laughing fully now, the sound carrying across the morning air. "This is exactly what we need to avoid. Professional at work, remember?" "Strictly professional," he agreed, then proved how unprofessional he could be by pulling her into a kiss that made her forget all about HR paperwork and disclosure forms. When they finally broke apart, the sun was fully up and reality was beginning to creep back in. They would have to face the world soon, meetings and mergers, board members and office politics. But for now, they had this moment, this perfect sunrise, this new beginning. "I should go home and change," Mabel said reluctantly. "I can't exactly show up to work in your shirt." "Why not?" "It looks better on you anyway." She swatted his arm playfully. "Because we're trying to be professional, remember?" "Right. Professional." He pressed one last kiss to her temple. "Though, for the record, you've never looked more beautiful than you do right now." The compliment made her blush, but she forced herself to step back. I'll see you at the office. Wait. He caught her hand before she could leave. Have dinner with me tonight? A proper date. No fake birthday parties involved. Her smile was radiant in the morning light. I'd like that. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, Bentley watched her move through his penthouse with easy familiarity, as if she belonged there. In many ways, she did. She'd been part of his life, his world, his heart for 3 years. The only difference now was that they could finally acknowledge it. "Mabel!" he called just before she reached the elevator. She turned, still wearing his shirt, hair messy from his fingers, looking more beautiful than he'd ever seen her. "Yes, I love you." Her smile could have outshone the sunrise. "I love you too, even when you make up fake birthday parties to seduce me. Never going to let me live that down, are you?" "Not a chance." The elevator dinged its arrival. "See you at the office, Mr. Lawson. See you at the office, Ms. Sawyer." And as the elevator doors closed between them, both knew that while maintaining professional distance at work would be challenging, what they'd found together was worth any amount of careful boundaries and HR paperwork. They had faced their fears, admitted their feelings, and chosen to be brave enough to try for something real. The sun continued its ascent over Chicago, promising a new day full of possibilities. And in a high-rise apartment and a penthouse suite, 2 hearts beat in perfect synchronization, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. Chapter 12. Epilogue. 6 months later. The Chicago skyline glowed gold in the late afternoon sun, the same way it had on that fateful evening 6 months ago. Mabel Sawyer stood at the familiar floor-to-ceiling windows of the Lawson Enterprises boardroom. But this time, she wasn't just the CEO's executive assistant. 3 promotions in 6 months, each one earned through brutal competition and flawless execution, had led to this moment. "The board is staring," she whispered to Bentley, who stood close enough for their shoulders to brush, professional but intimate. "Let them." His hand found hers under the conference table, hidden from view. A small smile played at his lips. "Ready to show them why I fell in love with your mind first." She squeezed his hand once before releasing it, straightening her jacket as she rose. The boardroom fell silent, all eyes on her. She wore deep blue today, the same color as the dress from that stormy night when everything changed. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant crown of braids, no longer hiding behind conservative corporate styles. "Mr. Lawson, members of the board," she began, her voice strong and clear. "Let me show you the future." Over the next hour, she laid out a 5-year strategy that would revolutionize Lawson Enterprises. Her presentation was flawless, her command of the room absolute. She fielded questions with razor-sharp precision, turning potential criticisms into opportunities. Even the most skeptical board members found themselves leaning forward, engaged despite themselves. Bentley watched from his seat at the head of the table, pride swelling in his chest. This brilliant, unstoppable force of nature had chosen to love him, to build a future with him. Every day he thanked whatever twist of fate had given him the courage to finally break through their carefully maintained distance, even if his methods had been less than perfect. The sun was setting by the time the presentation concluded, painting the boardroom in shades of amber and rose. The board members filed out, still discussing Mabel's proposals in excited tones. Even Harrison, who'd been the most vocal critic of their relationship, stopped to shake her hand. When they were finally alone, Bentley pulled her into his arms. "You were magnificent." Professional distance in the office, remember? But she was smiling as she settled against his chest. "The workday ended 10 minutes ago." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "And you deserve to be celebrated. That was the most brilliant strategy presentation I've ever seen. Better than your Singapore merger pitch?" "Much better, though I might be biased." She laughed, the sound echoing in the empty boardroom. Just a little. They stood together at the windows, watching the city transition from day to night. 6 months had changed so much, yet some things remained beautifully constant, the way their hearts beat in sync, the perfect fit of her head under his chin, the electricity that still sparked whenever their eyes met across a room. "Do you ever regret it?" Mabel asked softly, "taking the risk?" "Never." His arms tightened around her. "Though I do regret the fake birthday party. Not my finest moment." "I don't know." She turned in his arms to face him. "It led us here, didn't it? Sometimes the messiest beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings." "Who says this is an ending?" Bentley reached into his pocket, dropping to one knee as he pulled out a small velvet box. "I'm rather hoping it's just the beginning." Mabel's hands flew to her mouth as he opened the box, revealing a stunning ring that caught the last rays of sunset. "Mabel Sawyer," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "you've been running my life for 3 years, my heart for just as long. You challenge me, inspire me, make me better in every way. Will you marry me?" Tears sparkled in her eyes as she looked down at him. "The board will have opinions about this." "Let them," he grinned. "You just showed them exactly why you're irreplaceable. This isn't about corporate mergers or power plays. This is about me loving you, wanting to build a future together." "In that case," she pulled him to his feet, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Their kiss was sweet and tender, full of promises and possibilities. "We're going to change the world together," Bentley whispered against her lips. "We already have." She smiled up at him. "But I can't wait to see what we do next." As night fell over Chicago, the boardroom where they'd maintained professional distance for so long became the site of their newest beginning. The city lights twinkled below like earthbound stars, while in the glass tower above, 2 hearts beat as one, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The deception that had brought them together had long since been forgiven, transformed into a story they would tell their children someday, about how sometimes love requires a little courage, a lot of trust, and occasionally a fake birthday party to break down the walls we build around our hearts. Bentley held his fiancée close, marveling at how perfectly they fit together. In the reflection of the windows, he could see their future stretching out before them, bright, beautiful, and full of endless possibilities. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I love you too," she replied, her new ring catching the city lights. "Even when you make up fake parties to propose to me." His laughter joined hers, echoing through the boardroom where their story had begun and would continue to unfold, one beautiful chapter at a time. Outside, Chicago's lights sparkled like diamonds scattered across velvet, a fitting celebration for a love that had finally found its perfect moment. Some risks, they had learned, were always worth taking, and as they stood together in their glass tower, hearts beating in perfect synchronization, they knew that this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. Subscribe if you love.